Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Discourse in Magic. My name is Jonah, and in this episode, we sit down with the one and only Ryan Joyce. Ryan Joyce is a touring magician. He's been on Penn and Teller's Fool Us, he's been on every cruise ship ever, and he's been in every single little and big Ontario or Canadian city, rather. So he knows the touring life and he knows the stage performance life, and we talk about everything. We talk about cruises, we talk about four-walling a show, marketing, how things are different now than they were, and why he's really started to pack smaller to play bigger. As well, Ryan is doing this year the Ontario Week of Wonder, which is a really exciting magic festival happening in his town of Fergus, Ontario, that I'm very much looking forward to. I think you're going to really like this episode. We had a great time. We hung out at my place, and we really enjoyed ourselves. So I know I enjoyed this. I hope that you will. Here it is, another episode with Ryan Joyce. Hello, friends, and welcome to Discourse in Magic. I am here with the one and only Ryan Joyce. How are you?
Hello, I am super well, man. It's good to be here because I travel so much. This whole month is like me time. So.
You know what? This is super fun because I very rarely get a chance to do in person. I'm usually talking to people on the internet. Let's get into the story how we usually do. How did you get into magic?
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, we all have our cliched responses for that. I know we all do, and it's hard to regurgitate. To the lay public, I say the same thing that you probably would, and that is, some kind of a magic kid or moment, and all that is true. But my first magic memory was in junior kindergarten, and that was like really, really young. This is among the first memories I can ever have. I remember being under the desk, and I had like a rubber at the time, pencil eraser, and I remember making it quote unquote disappear, and there was another one across the room, and the kids beside me, I made it look like it was a magic moment. And that, I don't know what it was, but they must have been the reaction as a young kid.
You're
that just
become a
changed
god.
Everything. Yeah, man. It was like, because it was to learn at such a young age that you can do something to create a response is so unique. It usually takes, I feel, like a lifetime to realize that connection between people. And I think that's why magicians, they learn that kind of stuff really early on. They learn how to connect with people, or they don't. They're just performing at them.
I always sort of poke fun sometimes at magicians who talk about like affecting people like in the universe, and some do, but it's a real challenge to do magic that people remember 5 years later for any reason. But I definitely think that you impact people in the moment. Like if you're doing any magic, you impact people in the moment, and that's one of those early tools that we get.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I've never looked at the performance side of it. I've always been the vulnerable person on the stage. I don't want to take it on the persona that I'm in control. I haven't done that way. If I ever made a mistake, on stage, it would be easier to come back from that. But thank goodness I've never had to go down that road. But I've always tried to play the vulnerable side. So the magic, moments that I have in the show don't tend to lean towards something that we're all kind of experiencing together, and then appropriately used a strong moment where it's really directed at them. So then they kind of realize who's in charge, kind of a thing, and the performance structure of it, just like you would train anything. And I don't mean to demean it down to animals, but I mean, when you're thinking about it, 1,300 people is what I normally perform to. All of those, it's just one unit. They all act individually, but as a sum total, 50% of whatever it is that they're all experiencing is something that I'm controlling. So you start to learn that structure after you've done about 2,000-3,000 shows.
One of the things that really connected with me, that I don't remember where I heard it, but someone said, like, it's not one talking to 1,000, it's one talking to one times 1,000. It's different for 50 than it is for 500 than it is for 1,500. And for 1,500, a laugh or a moment bellows for many seconds longer.
And the other container is the container, is the venue. That changes. You can have 15,000 people in a venue that sees 60,000 people and it'd be the worst show of your life.
One thing that I always think about magicians who are on large stages is I think like, this guy solved the business thing. This guy solved and one of the things that I realized in chatting with you a little bit off of mic is how much your passion is for the magic itself and the experience. And so talk a little bit about, when you decided to take this as a serious career and when what that jump was like.
I read a lot of business books. I used to read a ton of magic books. So I have the magic knowledge and I have the business knowledge. And there's a quote that stands out in this particular instance. I'm going to dive into the business sector. A couple quotes come to mind. And the one that sticks out is luck is where opportunity meets hard work. And I know we've all heard that before. And that's really the biggest determining factor in a lot of this show business stuff is luck. So when I was in high school, I worked my tail off to convince the student council and the theatrical department to give me, I can't remember now, it's been so many years, $6,000 or $8,000. And I put together an illusion show. I mean, it was easier to get 3,000 from one and 4,000 from another kind of a thing than it was to get one.
Crazy.
Total, right? But I also.
And how old were you?
I was okay. This was my final year of high school, is when the production came on. I convinced them to let me put this show on, and it was a smashing mediocre success, is how I often define it. Right? It was. I mean, it did what it needed to do. In the process, I learned how to build. I built a bunch of props. I learned a bunch of lessons. One of those was ethics. I at the time didn't understand the ethics. We were super young. I learned more about costuming and decision making, and this was a show that, was an hour and a half. So we had to have 8 illusions in there. We also had some guest artists, smoke and fog, and, we set the fire alarm off in the school. And so you learn a lot in that short amount of time. The show was fine. It wasn't a disaster. It did what it needed to do. Somebody in the audience saw somebody that knew somebody, kind of a situation, and I got offered the same day that I paid tuition. I was computer engineering is what I was going to venture into. I got an offer to do 13 weeks on the road from a gentleman, Paul Reuter was his name. He's a good friend, and that 13 weeks turned into 13 years, and I never looked back. I was accepted to computer engineering. I had to get a refund. I never ended up going to university or anything. So this has just been and it's been an interesting career. I mean, it's been riddled with all ups and lots of downs. Like, I mean, I've played some really incredible places, and I've also lost literally everything. On the verge of near bankruptcy. So it's been an adventurous year. I mean, 20 years in the industry.
I love the scoring of that moment, which is you put a whole bunch of work into this thing and the right things at the right time. One thing I thought to myself when I was in school is in my summers, I was touring camps, right? And I just thought to myself, what are the other kids in my program doing? And I'm like, oh, they're doing math jobs. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess I know what it is that I want to do because this is the thing I'm putting effort into, right? This is the thing. So it's the same thing. It's what were you doing in high school? You were begging the schools for thousands of dollars to produce a show. And it's of course, this is the thing that,
Well, this is why the people listening they're so fortunate. The people listening are so fortunate because they have a passion. They've got an interest. There's probably more people that have no idea what they enjoy more than the 50%. That's what it is. As a math guy, you're going to, when more than 50% of you likes something enough, you're willing to endure the suffering to continue with it. And that's the only reason why someone succeeds or fails. Realistically, they just end up being the ones that work harder and longer.
So when we talk about, or when I think of rather, Ryan Joyce, I thought of big illusions because I thought of big stages and, maybe a lot of the video that I saw are big illusions. Your Penn and Teller stuff is one of my favorite illusions ever.
Isn't that a great piece? That's Mark Kalin's.
It is one of my favorite illusions ever. I was at Esther Follies. You ever heard of that place?
Yeah, of course.
Oh my goodness.
I know Ray.
He did that illusion and I was front row and that place is really close up. And it was just a whole different experience of that illusion. And it's just reawakened it in me.
Have you seen how it goes? Because it is a small venue. I haven't seen it in person with my own eyes, but Peter Manny was there with my buddy Tim, and they sent me a little video because there's only a few eclipses and so his eclipse goes up into the ceiling because the venue's so they I believe they crank it up. It's a great piece. It's just so massive. I don't have the piece anymore. Greg has it now.
I saw him do it. I didn't realize it was the same piece.
Yeah, I don't. Okay, so the illusion thing. Okay, so the reality of it is illusions. I've always been a show. right? And that's early on. Someone approached me with this, and for those listening that are maybe in the phase of making decisions, this is one of the toughest decisions a magician made back in my day, and that was: are you going to be a show or an act? And the decision, of course, was to focus on either 7 to 15 minutes competitive kind of style piece, or a full feature show. And at that time, acts were making it like you could just have your 15 minutes. Nowadays, you have to have a full show.
But also, isn't the goal of the 15 minutes to get the show? Like, isn't the goal of being on America's Got Talent 7 seasons in is to have the theater afterwards, or whatever, you know what I mean? Or like to get booked to do the 30 minutes, like, or are people being booked to do their 5-minute acts? Like, maybe I don't understand that world. Like,
and this is the problem with magic in general. I feel we suffer from this a lot, is that people's expectations are not really aligned with what's realistic.
Yeah.
Like, you want to start out and be a show, but the truth is I started out to be a show, and like I said, I was a smashing mediocre success. The show is not going to be incredible when you dive in and try to all of a sudden do an hour and a half of new material.
Right.
And looking back at it now, like I do a killer 45-minute show
that you've earned over 15 years.
Right. And to think of that, I was so ambitious to think I could do an hour and a half early. It's lunacy. Mm-hmm. But to get these 45 minutes carved down to this has taken, over 5,000 shows. But thank goodness this is where the passion comes in, because we're blind and ignorant to this, because that's what keeps us going. So be blind and ignorant to what I'm saying, but just be conscious aware. You will suddenly one day wake up and realize how far you've come if you just keep doing it.
That's the secret with, like, when people ask me about the podcast, I'm like, it's easier to do another one than it is to not. So I'm happy to keep doing it.
And most people never make the decision to actually just take the leap. They don't. They get stuck in that moment where they just talk themselves out of it.
So you took like a turn from doing big theater stuff. Like what?
So we did, So we, for 13 years, we ultimately ended up doing, towards the end, we were up to 135 live ticketed events from coast to coast. We would go from literally coast to coast. I've driven Canada over 14 times. I think it's maybe 15,
That's
16.
Crazy.
It's crazy. And you drop me in any city I performed in, I can tell you where to eat, where to go to, the hotel, the venue.
Right.
So we did that for forever, and it was really successful and a lot of fun. It was also a lot of work. There was a whole back end to that no one understood. When magicians would come to the theater show, they would look at it and they'd see, that time we were maybe 500 seat theaters, and they'd see it was usually very full, and it was in a theater or a venue, and the souvenir program and tickets with my name on it. They assume that that's all it takes. You just book the venue, and But we had 35 people in an office, 9 to 9, making telephone calls. We had a telemarketing operation, and there was 3 partners, and it was a big deal. And I was also subcontracting with other promoters and things. So it was a big, arduous ordeal that ended up in total chaos and in catastrophe at the 2008 timeframe. And that same, just as luck would have it, I had scheduled a 6-week tour in New Zealand, and I literally scraped out of this disaster bankruptcy tour, essentially, that ended all of my telemarketing career completely, or telephone promotion industry completely, in one swoop. I ended up going right from there right into a very lucrative tour. So it was the only thing that saved me.
So many lessons that you learned in like a short span, a lot like that grade 13 theater budget.
Yeah, that's it.
Let's talk about a lot of that. So one of the things that I wanted to ask you about is like, what does someone do to, I guess, like four-wall a show? That's what it's called, like booking out your own show, renting the theater, booking out the show. And it seems like you both found the secret and got absolutely roasted on the secret. So what
thankfully I have to fully give my appreciation to my mentor, Paul, who was I walked into what I would classify as a really great 1980s approach in 1990. And so 2000, my addition to the company, and we did very well when I walked into the situation, and when I left the situation, excluding the turn of events that happened towards the very end, we tripled our business. So we did exceptionally well by bringing that up to speed. But some of the lessons in that are applicable and some of them are not. Nowadays, it's so much easier to four-wall. I mean, not only that is it so much more easier with the tools like Facebook and direct marketing with Google. Like you can just target specific groups. But not only that, people are really fascinated and interested in magic, so they actually want to see it. We're in a big surge again. I keep referring to it as kind of like a vaudeville style. I don't know if my reference is correct, but I feel like people for the last 10 so years have spent a lot of time in their Twitter machines. And now they occasionally, these shows and events are coming up where people get to go out and experience something
It's the experiential thing. It's the, it's coming back, you know, it went away and now it's coming back. And
which is great for us.
So when we're talking about things like Facebook and Google, like, is there one sort of tip you can give someone if they're like, I want a 4-wall show? You're like, it's so easy now with Facebook and Google. What?
You know what? Content is king. That is just the bottom line. So I'm in the process right now of starting from zero on an event, and now I've got to sell a week of shows. So what's my first approach? And the first thing that I'm doing is nailing the branding. As a magician, as an event, in this case a festival, I need to nail the branding so that there's consistency. So I look to make sure that all of the elements align together and it looks visually appealing. Once I've got that, the first thing I'm nailing is the video. I need some shareable piece of content that is going to be the length of time is really variable, but under a minute. And I want that to be like as much viral as I can monetarily support, I suppose, in many cases. So, and nowadays, the beauty of Facebook, and I'm not sure what knowledge level everyone is, but this isn't even just Facebook, or it applies to any platform or digitally that you pay for, is you can have these beautiful things called tracking pixels. Somebody comes on your website and they watch something that you've done. Well, you can now target them specifically, and show them. Well, it's just cheaper.
The whole way.
Yeah. So we combine all those models together. It all boils down and rests entirely on content.
Right. You know, one of my favorite things about content and ad structure, Facebook and Google, the price per click goes down or up based on how shit or good your ad is, right? Like when you post something that gets a lot of great engagement, that people like, that whatever, it's much cheaper for Facebook to show it to 1,000 people than if it's horrible and they're trying to shove it down their throat because no one wants to see it and no one wants to click on it. So what's really cool about what you're saying is the more content you put, the more you can test. And literally there's a metric in front of you that tells you how much people are willing to see this. Is it $1 a person? Is it 12 cents a person? Is it $5 a person, right? So you get to see that stuff right in front of you.
And truth be told, those that are interested in four-walling it better learn how to be excited about it and be passionate about it. Because if you really want to take control of your own performance crew, that's something that these are the discussions you're going to have to start enjoying, because they're too expensive to outsource. I mean, you can do it, you certainly can do it, but nobody does these things better than you. And that's why, like, I'm on that front, I'm a terrible control freak because I am my brand.
But I agree with you, and you know, we geek out about this stuff, but like it's watching numbers every day, changing stuff, editing things. You know, like this isn't like I found the secret. If I put this in, then the tickets just come in. That's not what we're talking about here.
Okay, so here it is. Your length of content doesn't really matter as long as people watch between, ideally, as much percentage as view as time. But if you look at the videos, I look at the videos that I've had gone viral, and I look at the metrics on why this one has, the one has a couple million views. Why is that one versus this one not? And it boils down to the watch time, the percentage time. So if people watch something over 70%, and this is true on Facebook or YouTube, if it's in the 70% zone, they'll rank it more. YouTube knows it, and Facebook knows, people are watching 70% of this video. That's great. We're going to push this out. So if you can, that's why the length doesn't really matter. It's sort of subjective. As long as people are interested enough to watch 70% of it or higher, of course. But at the end of the day, there's a lot of 50%. I feel like it's going to get harder and harder because it's going to creep up and up and up. There's going to be a lot of 51% views and 52% views.
And do you retarget people who've watched over 70%?
Yeah, you can. 75% on Facebook. Yeah.
Is that you found that effective?
I've actually never gone through and done the analytics on the metrics.
I wanted to talk a little bit about these touring to small cities around Canada and big cities around Canada. And every summer I'm on a mini tour. I do a little bit of driving to a whole bunch of camps for a month, right? And I can't imagine doing that in the depth that you do, like Tell me about maybe what it's like at its best and what it's like at its worst. So if somebody who wants to do this can like
Definitely.
understand what this kind of thing is like.
Definitely. I mean, it was among some of the happiest times of my life because we had a big team. There were 7 people on the road and, a couple vehicles, and we had a 5-ton at the end for the last 3 or 4 years, a 5-ton. There was a period of time where it was a 5-ton truck. I'm sorry. Yeah. Because we didn't have the benefit of knowing that we were going to be performing in a theater every time. We had to work gyms. I worked, terrible. And I think the worst one ever was in Kitimat, BC. It was like a gymnasium, and they made this stage out of barrels, and they put like 4x8 sheets out, right? Like, so we would show up with the truss and the speakers and the lights, and we would make that a real thing, so that we could, when we came back next year, people went, "Oh, that was really great." So expectations is always something that I'm trying to satisfy.
And do you, only because you just said it, and it piqued my interest, on the tour, are you often like going there year 1 so that you can sell out year 2? Like, is that part of it, or really you're like, is it in the long game, or really like each show should be?
That's where it's complicated, because the reality is the more that someone trusts you, in this case the someone is a community, the more they're willing to support you. And so going in cold is what we would call it, it's not a situation that you want to do. So many of these cities that we were performing, the gentleman Paul had been performing 30 years before me. So what I could do,
inheriting his circuit helped a lot.
Absolutely. And in this case, it's a database, essentially. Everything is a database. And that's why magicians, if you're not collecting email addresses, you're not doing it right. I mean, it's hard. You've got to figure out what kind of dialogue you're having with these people. But these are all the tools that we've got to use nowadays. And I would have used them back then, but they didn't have that accessibility. Now we can like micro niche and reach out is great. It's exciting. But the logistics of doing something that I wouldn't even take that on nowadays anymore, because
a tour like that, you wouldn't take it on? Why not?
It would be impossible to. I mean, we still do a handful of events, but it was just, the scenario was so perfect. I mean, I look back in it now, it could never really be reduplicated. I mean, we had the promoter that we had, our main promoter. I mean, that's all he had ever done all his life. Like, he knew this industry, and it was just turnkey.
Right.
We could literally try a couple cold towns. We tried a couple cold places, and so that was where I learned very early on: posters don't do anything. Posters don't do a damn thing. So you can print all those fancy, get 1,000 printed at Vistaprint if you like, and then just throw them directly in the garbage, right? Because they're not going to do anything.
They really don't.
No. They support your branding. That's about it. And they are a necessity for like event day. You need all that stuff.
Yeah, but maybe it's not selling the tickets, but
it would be impossible nowadays. Just the logistics behind all of it. You got to think, like, we had 7 people. We were constantly moving in 2 vehicles, and it was just a logistical nightmare.
So interesting that it's like, you're kind of like, thank God it was handed to me, because who the heck knows like how one would build that sort of thing now. And obviously I'm sure there are people doing it. I've learned about some people that are doing some things similar, but it's a different game than it was. Getting a bunch of people to do telemark or whatever that, like that's entirely different game. So really interesting. You do a lot and champion a lot of Canada magic and Canadian magic. Something that really appealed to me is
absolutely.
On your site you have a section about like resources, and like they're just like a whole bunch of great Canadian resources, and it was just fantastic. I thought it was great, and I wanted to just hear you talk a little bit about like
sure,
continuing that.
It's on several fronts. One of the fronts is that I guess maybe with age, I've realized that first of all we're all connected, and whatever roots that we're connected in. And so for me, home has really, I've turned the vibrancy on home up so much because I travel, and it's really put in perspective how much I just adore my city, my country, where I live, and the fact that we have such a really great supportive magic base here in Canada. It really is a wonderful incredible union of people. So I wanted to be able to have that accessible so people could have those contacts, and I also wanted to be able to share to people other magicians. Like I can't do what Jay Sankey does. Jay Sankey's incredible. I couldn't teach anything. That guy is, and so I want to make sure that if someone's coming to me to learn to do magic, which is
you send them to the
possibly,
best person.
I want that. absolutely, I want him to go right to Jay because he's the man. So that's just my approach to it. And this comes down to another line. And in those van rides across the country, I would put the crew through, Zig Ziglar, and so this is a Zig Ziglar quote. You can have everything you want in this life as long as you help enough people get what they want. And I thought that is the absolute best way to run like business and life. So that's the approach I took with the website.
I love it, and I also think that clearly there's a direction to point it in the Canadian space. And I love that. And I also think that it's something that we should champion, and so much great magic has come from Canada, so many great magicians, and it's something to champion that I remember, in the early days of this podcast, we were really championing. And now since I've been talking to more people, I feel like the resource database has expanded past talking about Canada so much. But it was something that I really awakened me, and I really loved about your brand and what you do is just sort of reminding, especially the magicians, about Canada. And
yeah, every country, of course, has all their heritage of magic, and we all champion our own country. I'm certainly super proud of this, especially in the Canadian industry and the journey that we've come. In 2 years' time, look what's going to take place for the first time in history. FISM is coming to North America, and not only that, it's coming to Quebec. That's just incredible, and we know who to point fingers. There's several people, of course, to point fingers, but at the end of days, Canada wouldn't even have a place at the table if it wasn't for Joan. So it's really, really cool.
So let's talk about this touring performer's life. Part of your brand is touring tricks, right? It's performing everywhere, suitcases, and we'll talk a little bit about how you're now packing a little smaller than you were before. But the touring life, are you living the dream, or is this a grind of hell? And I understand both, and we were talking about this kind of thing earlier. I'm not expecting you to break the news that it feels like work a little bit. I understand, but does it sometimes feel oh man, I have to leave again? Is this the worst thing ever? Or do you have enough moments of glee in this magic, in the performing for 1,300, or does the 5,000 shows sort of mute it a little bit? You know what I mean?
Right? Does it dull? The edges get dull? And you know what? For performing, it has never. Even doing the same show now of course I change it up, elements of it, but for doing the same essential program, the same duration for this, you can walk off stage and have the best 45 minutes of your life. Really, it's just because there's whatever it is that happens when 1,300 people all experience something together. Whatever that is it a pheromone? I don't know. Whatever it is, it's
just the room is resonating.
Yeah. And when you're, when you get into that flow state, I would suspect that's what we would presume this is. You can also now communicate with these people on a different level. Somebody says something and you just instantly have the response. And what's going on there? What is it? And that's just in the moment stuff that you can't force it just coming out from underneath your feet. I don't know where it's coming from, but you can't buy it. You can't you have it fixed. You can't replace it. It has to be done in the moment on stage. So that's why I'm assuming everybody's listening wants to get into magic is for that moment. And at the same token, it's also you walk on stage, and I'm now to the point where the show is always scripted. I'm a firm believer in scripting so that you can fall back onto something without thinking. And so some days you just dial it in, right? You just going straight through, and that's usually, in my experience, a reflection of the energy in the room. I feel early on, I always suspected, because of TV has influenced us in a direction where we always think that what we're seeing is always going to be replaced in reality. So I remember as a kid, I was expecting these grandiose applauses, and that didn't really happen, right? But it used to bug me because I I knew where those punchlines would go because I'd done the show so much. I knew where they would go, and then when they formulaically didn't happen, as a math guy, that drove me crazy. And it wasn't until I realized later, you just have to sink into it.
Does an Anthony Jeselnik
clip where he gets off stage and he's like so angry at the audience, and he's something to the degree of like, they're wrong, like I tested this joke, it's funny, like so what the fuck, like what do you guys not laugh, like you guys were wrong tonight, like I don't understand another way to explain it. And
it's
like,
so true.
Yeah,
it's so true. And like on the ship and the cruise industry, a couple of strikes against you in that scenario, 3 strikes. One is that they didn't pay to see you. 2 is like,
so you do still have to win them over in the first 12 minutes,
and they'll leave if they don't. I've sat in shows where 60% of the crowd left, and that affects us greatly because I'm rated at the same token of this like the other guest entertainers, so it's a real thing. The other reason is like we don't know what these people just did all day. In many cases they've been out in the sun and they're exhausted, or they've eaten their 9th meal, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. And the third thing is like someone else is structuring where you are going to be placed in the week. If they don't like you, if they don't know you, they're not going to put you in a prime location. So there's lots of strikes that are against you on that side of it that are specifically unique to that industry.
Right.
Very, very, very different circumstances. Feels very corporate related. Like if people listening can rock the corporate world, you can walk on a ship and rock that too, because you just got to play the line right.
Right. You have to play the game the way that the game is played, and whatever that means.
Yeah.
Do you find that I don't know, I think about the last maybe 6 months or a year or 2 years, like I've been doing 20 some odd shows a month, 20 some odd performances a month. It's enough that makes me feel both sides of the coin all at once. One that's like, it's so great to be saying these lines so the way I did yesterday, and it's singing and it's ringing and it's so great and whatever. And then the other part is just being like, have I stepped back and had enough time to enjoy the thing that I'm doing that is magic? Isn't part of this that I like to come up with something new? Am I just doing the same act? One of the jokes I talk about with performing is like, the biggest trick of magic is that all these nerds who are obsessed with sitting at home problem solving now have to be on biggest stages entertaining for the biggest audiences. Like, the indoorsy type now has to be the one on the stage. And obviously many of us, love being up there. I love being up there. I love being on the stage. But I also think that like, is your season structure that you've got enough off time that you feel like you're on time is like or are you just always going?
I burnt out last year. I burnt out completely. So I averaged 35 weeks away every year for, now almost 20 years. So I burnt out last year, and so I whittled my schedule down to 1 week away a month, because it's the airports really that rot my soul. But the performing I enjoy, but up to that point, and so the year that I this is too much. I did 42 weeks. It was 42 weeks I spent, and it's a long time, and it was just situational. I got to see Australia and French Polynesians and Hawaii and all that, but it was just, I had to be on the same ship for over 6.5 months. So
it's like, I'm sure dry land was like.
Well, the other cruise entertainers listening will probably relate to this. I'm now the cruise entertainer that I just never leave the ship. So that's why I got interested in vlogging, and to learn those skills was invaluable, man.
Wow. Well, it sounds like you've been put through the ringer on performing, but also that like you so clearly love it, and like it's just all the parts that like the traveling and all the shit parts you don't like.
Well, in tour we had people. We were with friends. Some of my closest friends of my, like this last week one was super unique for me. It was some of my closest friend's wedding, and she was at one point on stage with me, and then she was for probably 7 years production assistant, and he was the audio engineer, and they just got married on the weekend. So this wedding was a reunion of literally like 9 degrees. Well, not only that, but I had there was like 7 assistants there that had just over the years, we all collided together. It's like a nucleus magic right in the middle, and then all these people. So it was just this strange, like 12 generations of people that I had shared on stage. It was so weird,
but it's amazing. And like part of the thing that I'm taking from this is that when you're doing it with friends, it's a lot easier. It's a lot of fun when there's a lot of people all doing their jobs. There's moving pieces, and everyone's resting at the same times or the right times. Instead of it just being like, well, there's unlimited things to do and I have to do all of them. So
that being said, the first 3 days of anything are always shitty. Like
Right.
I always said, the first 3 days of tour are going to be a total nightmare. You're going to think, how are we going to be able to do 3 more months of this? Is it going to be impossible? And then suddenly it just switches. Everyone gets into routine, and that's why nowadays it's so tough, because when I still do quote unquote tour, it's nowhere near what it used to be. Right? It'll be like 1 or 2 gigs here, 1 or 2. You can never get into state or a flow or any kind of rhythm with everybody. So all of the time it's just all the chaos of let's move all of this gear over here and everybody unpack it, and then we got to go to the venue, and then we got to it's just nuts.
So there's this trend that's been going on in 20 years or 15 years of everyone going from, not everyone, but many people going from ginormous things that are cut in half on stage or bringing walls to walk through, to this pack small plays big, but more than that, this idea that you are the show, and with a little bag of things, like, you can do the show. And both ideas appeal to me. Part of me says, like, I spent a few days with Paul V. Hill, a lot of amazing magic, but one thing that he did that really spoke to me is he had a briefcase and he was like, all the magic I do is in this. And I was like, oh, that's cool. No, but what about da-da-da? And he's like, no, all of the magic that I do is in this case. And something about this wizard walking around with his case of wizardry is like, I'm kind of like, yeah, like, I don't want to be like, oh, sorry, I don't have my giant box here, like, to cut in half. But then the other side of the coin is we are putting on shows. We're show producers. We're trying to, like, do something big. Like, do I really just want to be like, hey, here's my show. I have a marker and a piece of paper and I'm ready to have some fun. So talk to me about that switch when you decided that you were tired of.
Yeah, well, and Illusion specifically, I mean, they had their phase, right? And I enjoyed the bigger, captivating visuals of Illusions, but as a show, it was almost required. So to have a
I guess that's true for however long, whatever it was, 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah,
that
it was an expensive requirement, man. Like when we were touring at the beginning, I wanted to try to change the show dramatically each and every time. That's a lot of work. I mean, just to do that, we would have to spend 2 weeks find a location to rent out, and it was just a big, arduous task. I'm so glad Illusions, in many regards, are done. What I do miss about it is the music side of it, because adding music to performance in general is just a way of adding a different layer that we don't. Music, it just touches people in a way that you can't duplicate. And so now I'm thrilled that a lot of it is portable and comedy and mentalism and all that. I love that. It's just so cool. I do miss that moment where, just like in anything, you need to mix it up between talking and not talking.
And also like we're trying to give people this like the craziest experience of their life. And sometimes that's like being like, how the fuck is this happening? Right? Like, and sometimes it's something that only a big illusion can capture. It's just like, I'm fooled. And it's not an instant, but it's minutes of you just being like, how is their head over there in their body or whatever, right? Like, it's this, it is an entirely different feeling. It gives you a different
all
level of joy.
It just boils down to $300 a month in a storage unit. That's what it all boils down to. I mean, it sits there, and I've got like 40 feet of truss, and I've got curtains to fill a ballroom. I mean, like I have everything that just sits there.
Hence the giant Magic Convention Week festival. But I figured it out. So talk about this move that you made towards like playing a little bit smaller or already packing smaller rather.
Absolutely. Well, my approach with the show now, because everything I do is fly on, and so I wanted to be able to nail a 45-minute time frame like the cruise wants, and be able to essentially replace that show if I lost it at a dollar store. That's kind of my motif.
The vision is you get on the flight, you get off, they say, sorry, your show didn't come with, and you're like, I can put this together. And just to like point out, like, that being the decision around making a show smaller is like an actual physical problem-solving barrier to approach that like is a necessity in order to, you're like, I only have 2 hands to walk through the airport if it's just me. So this is the maximum amount of stuff I can take. How do I fill the best show I can in this amount of space?
Yeah, it's true. It's a sense of empowerment that when you have that, you understand, and when you don't understand. But when you reach it, you thankfully you don't have to look back. And I do a hypnosis show, So I've kind of had that confidence from the beginning. I always knew that if the magic
Me and
show,
a microphone is quite enough.
Yeah, and that came about by total happen chance. Talk about having to create your show out of nothingness. We were in the middle of Canada, outside of Winnipeg, and our truck wasn't going to arrive in time for the show. And so, like, at that time we were traveling, so the some team was in the truck and some team was with me in the van, so we could set up the show to do like a walk on and speakers and microphone and stuff. We were fine, but that was it. And so I had to make a decision, and it was like I had been practicing like hypnosis, but how do you like practice a hypnosis show, right? Like you've got to
practicing pickpocketing.
Yes. Right? Oh, so it was so stressful. And again, I walked out and it was a smashing mediocre success because it's the first time. It's not going to be amazing the first time of anything you do. But it was great. We didn't have to refund and people were happy. That was what I was super thrilled about.
I was going to say, I hesitate because I really want to call this episode a smashing mediocre success, but I think it's so mean. Ryan Joyce, the smashing. but the idea of like doing something for the first time and it's gonna suck, but hopefully it sucks 49%, and the 51 is I could do this, and it's true. It's true putting every trick on stage for the first time. It's true. You're like, wow, that sucks. Let me try it again.
And by sucks, neither of us are referring to underprepared. You know, that there's a total difference in that front. All of the stuff that we always prepared, but you never know until it hits an audience where the timing is going to be, where they're going to react, where they're going to gasp or applaud or not. Your expectations are never fully aligned, ever. And this doesn't matter who I'm talking with, and being 20 years in the industry, they all say the same thing. New material sucks balls.
The biggest secret of magic is the same as the biggest secret of sales, which is like the reason why they look so good saying what they're saying is because you, who feels like you're coming up with original response and reaction, they've seen a quadrillion times in every different way, right? Like the biggest secret of magic is I know how this trick ends, not only because I know how the trick ends, because I know what you do, because I've done it 1,000 times, and it's a first time for you, but surely for me, it's not the first time you've reached to shuffle my deck of cards. That's right. You know, like surely it's not, right? So I've learned this by repetition, and for you, it's the very first time. So that's definitely like a really big lesson there. And have you found, not confidence, but are you now on the other side of a smaller show that you like love it more now, or do you still kind of pine for the days that you can cut people in half or whatever?
Well, I'll still offer that to the ship. They can still fly that material. But the last time I lost a piece, I lost origami, and it was, I mean, I love the prop dearly.
Oh, lost it on a flight.
Yeah. And so I love it dearly, but it was kind of a good kick in my face to say, stop doing this piece. Right. It's no longer 2010. So it was, but I mean, it's still as painful to lose something like that. But so I feel it's really freeing to be able to get to that point. And not only that, is just the simplicity of it is so important, especially nowadays. Everything's turnkey on the ship and the corporate market and anything, a high school show, a college show, whatever. You're going to have a fixed amount of time to do what you got to do and be ready and to have the level of confidence that you need to walk out on stage. I just want to minimize all that other bullshit that happens beforehand.
Everything else. And part of what we were talking about earlier is how you've replaced a lot of that grand illusion stuff with now by adding video and projection, and maybe one of the things that it allowed you to do is step back and say, like, how can I put this effort into the experience? And sometimes that just means like packing a projector and a camera and a laptop and figuring out what it is that you're doing to make the experience great. And we were talking about some stuff that you do in the show, which really helps paint the whole experience and like maybe does give someone a better feeling for you and your magic show and what they're experiencing than a giant illusion that they may have seen before or at least felt before, you know?
For sure. I always feel like if immediately within the amount of time that the person that's sitting there watching you realizes that they have experienced something they've never seen before, if you can do that pretty quick, they'll maintain that motif in their own head. And the worst thing that I would want in 10,000 years is for somebody to leave the show and go, well, I saw all of that stuff before. I'm doing all of the stuff that everybody else is doing. There's only, within reason, there's only so much we can do. We can predict stuff and tear stuff. But it's just it's the person, it's the personality, and all of that boils down to confidence. That is honestly the secret to everything, and we all know that. It's just how do you build it, and the building comes from the time, exposure, and doing.
The failing, and then succeeding, and then hopefully enough to,
It's like mixing cement. Like there's all that work at the beginning, and it's just nightmare. What we've got to dig a hole. Like this is, and passion is the only thing that's like, oh, I want to dig a hole, right? And then there's that period of time where it curates. That's just misery, especially as artists. Am I not good enough? Am I not getting better? And what's happening is curation. Things are getting solidifying, and it's micro detail at that point. But it's as an artist, it's like I'm not growing. But really, it's just
the thing that's most impressive about that is you can easily fall into, I've been doing the same thing for 30 years and I'm just going to keep doing the same thing. You're actively talking about not only adding different things to your show, visuals and whatnot, but also adding those things to producing videos and making videos like off stage, online, and sharing that stuff as well, and getting,
or whatever the passion is of the the listener. I mean, whatever it is, you've got to find a way to work it in because you're already working at it.
It's true, and it's sort of like a secret. You get to like do more of the other thing that you want if you cross the paths a little bit. Let's talk about videos for a second. I'm super blown away because it's like, I like look through the vlog, I look through the videos, I look through the blog, I look through and I'm like, when in the world does he have time while he's on the stage to film himself being on the stage? What is going on here that he's like, hey, I just arrived at the theater. Like, don't you have bags? Like, how could you? Funny. But how could you be the magician and film it and vlog it at the same time?
Well, I've definitely hit my 10,000 hours on video production now. I can now walk into an environment and take 25 minutes of video and leave that environment with the video. So I've got that curation has occurred on the video production side of it, but I enjoy it because it's like a little puzzle, and my brain loves to I can't have a silent brain. I've got to constantly be working. Not to say that I don't do mindfulness and things like that, which I also think are super important, especially for magicians in the creative market industry. These kinds of tools, mindfulness and such. But to be able to just focus intensely on a specific task is,
incredibly. Whoever can focus on the thing longest wins.
Yeah,
I think that's
it's so true.
Especially in this time frame in this generation, whoever can focus the longest on the thing deepest, whoever can get into that flow state, and whoever can maintain that thing the longest wins.
And people who inherently know where their interest level is somewhere inside. Like there's people listening, that just love magic. That's all. They're enthusiasts. They just love to hear about it and talk about it. They don't want to make it professionally. Some people really want to make it professionally and really want to. But is that passion going to last more than 6 months? And if it does, it is likely that you're going to get there eventually if you consistently strive to get better. And one of the tools that we're kind of combining everything that we've talked about together is the video. Video is the only thing that I think as entertainers we can objectively and subjectively look at ourselves and go, okay, this needs to improve and this needs to improve and this, because without it, those times that you fast forward yourself, that's the shit you got to correct.
And it's like when you watch the video back the first time and you're like, I am awful, right? And fixing that so that you can at least sit back and not smile, but maybe just feel okay. As much as that's the big struggle for us, that's also the thing that keeps us alive. And, one of the things that I'm super excited about right now is because of this big boom of magic, this experiential magic, but also, everybody has seen magic, even if they don't try to. You can scroll through Facebook and see Shinlim appearing on America's Got Talent, or this is happening to lay people, because when a video has 30 million views, Facebook shows it to you. Lay people know who Rick Lax is, sitting in his coffee shop doing tricks, and lay people know what Penn and Teller Fool Us is, and we're getting to this interesting place where exposure to magic, like you were saying before, I have seen this before, exposure to magic is putting a pressure on magicians.
It is raising the bar.
Right. And now we're all having to say to ourselves, how can we be better? Let's actually stop doing this crap and let's be better. And what that means is this voice in our heads, you cannot silence it. You have to work up to it, like our goal here isn't to be like, shut up, keep doing the banana bandana, right? Our goal is to say like, you're right, voice in my brain, like maybe it's time to, or whatever that trick is, or maybe it's time to put my own spin on this, or maybe it's so that people don't feel, yeah, I've seen this before, and so that we're pushing that forward. So I love that.
Before you give up on like a routine, give it a couple performances. Like one of the bits in the show now, I totally was ready to just chop it. I didn't want to do it, but it was, the beginning of the tour. I knew 3 days in, but you stick with it. And eventually over time, like you'll have a line that'll come out, it'll change everything, or an idea, or one little tiny little thing. Cause it's hard to marry yourself to material, especially on the air, not being influenced by the person that you've seen perform it. That's a really challenging thing for magicians.
Right now, my biggest struggle with material is I'm trying to pick new material, but it's very hard to do without thinking about the person who I'm impressed upon by, and then I'm like, well, now I'm screwed because now I have to like choose to do something different than that guy, right? So like one thing I've been doing is getting excited about material that I see in another language, because I don't really know what the guy's talking about, but that looks kind of cool, and maybe I'll do my own kind of cool thing, or actually the one now that's exciting me, which is like obviously is like going to books. I'm not influenced by what exactly you were doing. Like maybe I'll remember one sentence of your pattern that you wrote, and I'll forget about it, and I'll think I'll maybe make it feel like my own idea. You know what I mean? Like. So I definitely resonate with that.
I'd be curious to know what everybody does in their own department of like creativity. Like I always write stuff down. I've got like books and cards, and nowadays it's on OneNote or something. But yeah. I'm curious what most people do for their archiving and their brainstorming and their ideas.
One idea that I explored recently in the podcast, in a newsletter, is this thought of like, what do you have to show for the magic that you can do? And if the answer is like, it's all up here, then you're fucked, right? Like you are screwed. It's true, right? Like you have to say like, here's my folder of or here's my files of all of my scripts and my audio clips and my lighting cues, and and it doesn't have to be that. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's, here's all my clients, here's all my, whatever the thing is, but like, if it's all up here, I know every year because I just know, or like, where's your script? You're like, it's all in my brain. Like, it's like, so that thing is interesting to me, which is, I don't care what someone's process, like, I'm interested to know about it, but like, I'm not privy to one process over another. Maybe you sit by the fire and sip a tea and like write it down. Maybe one thing I do is like, I talk out a script into a microphone, and then I listen to it back and write it out, and then I edit that thing on paper, because like I can't stare at blank paper. It just takes me, right? So it's easier for me to fill the air.
I'll start on the computer, and then it has to be spoken out loud. Out loud. There's no way you can write something and not speak it out. And then,
it's the most important step to me.
Yep.
I start with it, but in general, the idea was just trying to say there's like, doesn't matter how you start, you have to have the thing to show for it at the end. Maybe you write it first, maybe you talk it out with a friend, but like it's that putting it to paper that makes it real. And one of the things I was going to touch on in talking about like trying something for the first time is you have to give yourself, and this is something that I am at fault to so much. I don't do this so much, and it's particularly because I get to perform at Newest Trick in the book, which like, sometimes it's a small crowd, and like if something goes wrong, like, I'm doing other things with my week. Sometimes I don't put enough work in. And then when I try the trick for the first time, it doesn't only go bad, but it's real bad. And it's so bad that I go, I don't want to do this anymore. And now I've just screwed myself out of this trick by not giving it the respect that it deserved on the front end, right? Like, so one of the lessons that I learned in that like first attempt is like, you have to give it your all. That's got to be the best iteration of your script. I mean, obviously it won't be, but you got to feel like it is, you got to like...
You got to know you put everything into it, because if you just do a half-assed effort and then you make a judgment on you always doubt yourself.
Yeah, and we also have to be the ones to make the decision that like, that actually does suck, and I should stop doing that. And so you have to know that you gave it the honest shot to know that it works. On that line of scripting, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about was like choreography and scripting, but I guess I'm thinking about it from the Grand Illusion days, and that's those clips and stuff. But I know that it's all, you got to be doing it all still. There's not choreography in one, but not the other.
Basics and things. I mean, everyone should get some kind of a grasp about staging for sure. Stage left and stage right, and all those little basic details. Just remember though, I always where you stand. When I was first starting, I would move left and right, all over. And if I were to pinpoint one difference between Ryan Joyce 12 years ago and Ryan Joyce now, it's like I will stand and plant and almost look like one person right in the eyes. And when you don't move, it forces everybody to be like locked into you. So Stacy from the Majestics back in World Greatest Magic days, you know, I just love them. The Jinx, she gave a wonderful piece of advice, and this might have been Joni Spinas at the end of days. And this doesn't matter if you're an illusionist, a closer performer, or a stage performer. The best thing that you could potentially do is to try to make eye contact with as many people in the audience as possible. And when you're in front of lights, you're not seeing anybody. You're fake making eye contact with people in the audience. It's a skill that you've got to nail right off the bat, because people see people's eyes. That's how they connect. And so if you can make people believe that you looked right into their eyes, it changes everything.
You know, it's interesting you talk about that, because that is like such a big challenge in vlogging, is like you're just talking to yourself, but the sincerity's there. And I know for me, like one struggle I went through recently is I changed the structures of some of the solo episodes of the podcast, because I just can't talk to myself. Like I need the other person's face. Like I need it so badly to just understand where I'm going, like so badly that like and that's something I struggle with on stage, is just smiling at the nobody. And like you need the laughs and the, you know what I mean, like you need the feedback. And you know the joke is, which everybody knows in theater, is like as soon as you can see your audience, you stepped out of the light. You have to go back. You have to, like, as soon as you're actually like, oh, I know who, you're like, no, yeah.
It's incredible to watch people. You can tell who's seasoned and who hasn't. And if there's a dead spot on stage and someone goes and stands in it, they're probably not a seasoned professional.
But it's like, I almost want to be like, I understand why, right? Like you're doing it for a good reason, but it doesn't help your cause. They can't see you. Yeah, I love that. What else can you tell us about like choreography? Because I think it's something that is underworked on in magic, and then you see it on stage, someone realizes, they're like, oh, I'm standing on their wrong side, and they go to this side and they have to go back to that side, and you see it.
Yeah, most choreography boils down to just pre-planning all of your actions and your thoughts. And we all fall into this, myself included. If you do something new, you forget that, you need to put the Sharpie in your inner left pocket. And so the difference, from, again, in reference to time, from a magician 12, 15 years ago to now, is like I can really sit through and really think about where everything's going to be, because I'm actually in many cases strategically planning out my own steps and things. And the problem with it is like you get to know your show so well that you know the problems where there's going to be, I've got to duck around the stairs to get into the audience for this point, and you know all these little intricacies that you can sort of start to manage differently that you couldn't do without the experience. So without the experience, a couple things that you can do, of course, is to video yourself all the time. Definitely number one, video yourself all the time. Stay in the center region. I like to give people the understanding, like if you had to do your show with a microphone stand, could you do it? And if you think about it in that perspective, it'll change everything, because someday you're going to step up on stage and you're going to have to do a show with a microphone stand. I can't tell you why. I don't have any idea, but it's going to happen. And so if you are
in your 3,000 shows,
that's
it'll
right.
happen.
That's right. And I just had added a new line to the show because of it. So I mean, if you understand the limitations, if you go down to the absolute worst case scenario of your performance career, and that's going to be having to do it with a microphone stand, well, if you're already prepared for that and working towards that, then it makes things easier. You'll fidget and fiddle, and you gotta be cognizant that you're doing that. It takes forever to carve those things away, so it's really hard to give too many nitpick points, especially early on. But once you're aware of these things, then you can start to change them. But if you're not recording yourself, you're not able to be aware of them. So it starts there.
Sometimes the best shows are the ones where there's this crazy obstacle and you're like, thank goodness for my 10 years of this, because now I feel this show that would have been a 30% is a 70%, and I feel great. Like sometimes that's the big W, is being like, in even the worst, I overcame it. Part of it, which is like, is the funny truth, is most of the answers come from not only doing it a lot, but caring enough to not waste those iterations. It's that idea of like, the 10,000 hours, right? Well, as I think I said in an episode before, but like, my mother's driven for 10,000 hours, but she's not an expert driver, right?
That's great.
Right? And someone else gave me that. I don't remember where that came from, but it's super true. And what you're saying about the video is one of the big answers there, which is like, you can't just, the first answer is you have to perform a lot, because then you put the pen in the wrong pocket. And the answer after that is you have to perform a lot and care to not have to fiddle for the pen every time. And those are different amounts of like, there's different effort. Like, some people care a lot about the pocket, and some people are like, so I'll forget. It's either the left one or the right one. I just have to remember the pen,
And then there's get to the point where you realize if you replace the pen and you clip it back in with your 3 cards for the next show, you're already set for the next show. So
you're resetting while you're performing in your head.
That brings up a whole other separate point, which is there's been days where when you're doing 2 or 3 show days where you stand out and you're like, did I say this line already? Like, there's real like delusional things that happen on stage.
You're doing the exact same lines and moment. Sometimes, you're like stuck and you're like, where am I? Which one did I do yet? Like, was that today's? And also particularly true when you can't see the audience. So nothing feels different. Everything feels exactly the same.
Oh, it's so true.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. Back to the idea of, performing lots and doing a lot of shows. We've spoken a little bit about like stepping off stage and feeling very relieved, and very good, feeling like you're really in that flow state while you're on stage and really enjoying it. How do you feel before shows? Do you feel like I have to wake up for work again, like I'm going to work? Does it feel like I get to do this? Like, you love show day?
Show day, unless it's like I've got to pack a truck, and there's road cases and stuff, then it's like, oh God. The show part I love, but show days is amazing. And backstage, I'm usually pretty like uncharacteristically calm, but I don't know if that's the ship life is so comfortable that it seems so familiar. But a lot of people remark that like I should look like I'm more something. Something. I don't know what and like I'll have full conversations with them, and then just be like the thing's called and I go out.
Gotta go.
I'm okay.
You're on in
with
3.
that.
You're like, okay. And this is in the back of your head.
It's not so much it is a switch. Of course it's a switch, because I can't walk out there and be the same version of me that I was just minutes ago. Your everything has got to be dialed up a bit. You still got to be you, the authentic version of you, but everything has to be turned up a bit, and that includes the confidence, and that comes over time. But like that version of me that steps out after a conversation with the stage director or with the director or whatnot, that's the same me. I'm not like a fake version. It's just that's the hardest part of the whole journey, is for people discovering who they are, because we emulate first, and a lot of people, especially since everything's so accessible nowadays, people can watch and copy. And so, how do you break away and start to do your own thing? That's the journey that every magician will fall upon.
It's just when that moment is, or when you really decide to like.
Yeah, how do you make this unique? How do you make this you? How do you be interesting? Is the bottom line. That's the secret of being a successful anything. Replace magician with anything, and it's be interesting. If you can't learn to be interesting, you're going to have a hard time, especially in this industry.
One of the things we were talking about at the very beginning is you talking about like flipping it to the you. In the audience, is making it about them and them caring and stuff like that. And that I also think is another turning point in a magician's life, where you realize that you're like, I'm just talking to myself up here. What the fuck?
Right.
And all the scripts change, because you realize you want to be talking to them. And, from what I've heard about the show that you're doing right now, you focus quite a bit on them and the experience. And so talk a little bit about that, and maybe like what someone can do now who has a show or is starting to have a show, to maybe like press pause, step back, and think more about the audience, and make sure they're not diving down this rabbit hole of like me, which, like you were saying before, is like, it's half the game is figuring out how to be interesting. How can things be you, but also like it's half us and half them.
Right. Well, the easiest solution to one of the problems of turning it to the audience is that when you're in your script writing, start each sentence with you. I have one story moment in the show, and it's not really necessarily a story about me, but magicians love to add stories, and that's great. Storytelling could be really great, but just it doesn't have to be 9 minutes, and make sure it's relevant to them at some point, because people, we're selfish people by nature. That we survived and evolved because of selfishness. We're living because of it. So, turn it to them and their needs and what they're going to get out of it. It's this basis of sales as well. So,
yeah. I love that idea of starting the lines with you and seeing how that feels.
Because it's also, you have to start a lot of sentences with I in the show, because they are there to see you. They are there to see the magician. But it's really, especially at the beginning of the show, people they don't care who you are yet. Impress them first. It's instant gratification world.
The amount you can get away with at the end of the show, if you really prove yourself in the beginning of the show.
A buddy of mine on the ship, who was a violinist, not a magician, he called it the standing ovation formula. And if you boil it down, any formula that you stick to and work can be successful. But all of the points have to be in there. You got to bring them up, you got to bring them down, and you got to make them laugh. If you can fill all of those journeys and towards the end bring them a little bit lower and emotional, then you can tend to get them to stand out of their seats.
One thing that really struck me about you is when you're doing shows of that magnitude, going coast to coast and booking stuff out like that, it struck me as so amazing how obsessed you are about the creative and the magic, and how you don't really lean to talk so much about the business and I know you love it. I love it too, but it's kind of like, it seems like the means to be able to go and do the magic, right? And a lot of times, I was very surprised when I spoke to Dave Curran on this podcast, because he was like, this is a great business and I'm using it to operate as a business, and I'm producing shows as a business, and I'm the performer of the business, and it's a great business, right? And it seems like you're doing that, but it seems like it's all for that 48 minutes on stage or whatever.
Yeah,
right?
I'm terrible with the sales side of it. I know that. So my business excitement is certainly on the marketing and the problem solving, and the SEO and the branding. I love branding and marketing and all that stuff, but the communication and the email side of it is really my worst position. I can't. I struggle greatly at it, and it's only because right now, personally, I've got 9 things on the plate at the same time, and it takes so long to write a nice, short, concise email.
I know. It takes 3 days to write a great few sentence email.
Well, it's so terrible. And I feel like those people need the best version of me. So if I don't give them a nice reply or whatever, I struggle with it greatly. So I enjoy talking about all sorts of the sides of magic. I'm certainly, because as we were discussing earlier, because I've been doing this for so long, I'm not up to speed on a lot of the newest and the latest and the greatest. But I think creatively magic all the time. I think once we've been bitten and had that venom inside of us that now takes over our body, we think like magicians all the time. And I also think, I look at the real world and I'm like, that would be so much better if they did it like this, and it would be the way a magician would approach something.
Yeah.
I love that. That's
I think
a gift
about that
we
stuff
have.
all the time. I also think one of the challenges when young kids get into magic is that you have to be understanding that there's 2 worlds. There's the secret world and that there's their world. And I think that that communication, that secret, that the design on the back end can make something on the front end seem flawless. I think about a MacBook mouse where it just looks like a white thing, but all the things are on the inside, right?
And magnets can solve the world's problems.
Yeah, magnets. But just thinking about those different magical thoughts helps us problem solve in cool ways. And I didn't expect that you would be fuck magic. I didn't expect that,
right.
But I'm very excited to hear how much you're still doing it all for the shows, and it's not a lot of people you ask about magic, they're like, well, what other skills, what else could I do? But it feels like you want to be up there, and it's great that you're performing for amazing large theaters, and people dream about that. And one of the things that you mentioned is a lot of the advice and me saying, how would you do this now? You're like, well, you can't do this now. It was then. But if someone looking now and they're or they listen to this and they're like, 42 weeks of tour. I want to do that. He's wrong. He's crazy. He whatever. How would you what would you tell them to allow them? And I know it's different than it was before, but you were quite recently doing 42 weeks of tour. What would you tell someone who wants to be that person in a positive way, not a word of warning, but maybe like what should they really do to?
Well, that's mostly cruise ships. So I'll preface that. A lot of that was cruise ships. You can work as much as you want on cruise ships if you are a solid act and you get you don't even have to be the best act as long as you're a really nice, easygoing person. Right. They will book you for a lifetime. It's harder to get off ships than it is to get on ships. So I swear, if you have the chops, you can do this too. And the cruise industry is not shrinking. It is a corporate monster. It is getting bigger. Virgin Cruise Lines is coming out with some ships. Forever was exclusive with Celebrity. They've got now like 2 or 3 new ships coming out soon. And you got to think like that. That's a lot of schedules to fill. So there is work out there available, and you've got to really you'll only be bad once. So if you walk on and you're not ready, you will punish for that, and that's at your own doing.
And hopefully be better before you try this cruise shit. like I think about someone listening to this who like just got started managing, be like, time for my cruise ship. It's like probably not, because you'll get eaten alive. But if you think you can handle it, you can probably handle it. You'll probably be good up there. So that's awesome advice, and this has been super, super amazing to better understand like what the world of touring tricks really looks like.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
So we're getting towards the end, towards the wrap-up section. There's some wrap-up questions. So the first is, what is something in the world of Magic 2019 that you like, and something in the world of Magic right now that you don't really like, or that you see coming that you don't really like?
Well, okay, let's start with the don't like then. One thing that I don't like, and I see this a ton, is I don't like when magicians put someone down on stage. So I saw this just actually relatively recently, and I cringe real easy, but if you got to understand that every other person in the audience is also cringing when you put down someone that came up out of their seat, out of the goodness of their heart to help this magician, and they come up on stage, and now you say something that demeans them. You instantly turn your entire audience away from you. So I don't know if it's a trend of just bluntness anymore, but I think showmanship has got to be a little bit more predominant, and that includes being really, really polite to everybody. Mm-hmm. I think that's super important. We've got to treat everybody like we want to treat ourselves, and the audience can't quantify that. They won't leave their show and say, wow, he treated everybody so nice. Right. But they will absolutely say that he was the biggest dick in the world because he put that person down, and I was embarrassed for her. Yeah. I mean, that'll ruin your career, and I've seen that a little bit more than I expected to see over the last couple of years. One of the things that I love is I love that Magic is now becoming very, very individualized. I love the fact that people are really creating their own unique personalities and putting their stamp on it, and the fact that I feel like Magic's ethics have sort of evolved over the last handful of years. I feel like there was a time where you wouldn't want to put yourself out on video and do something because everybody was going to steal it. Now that's still there, but the truth is that we're seeing all of these people flourish into their own brands and personalities because they feel safe and they're creating, and people aren't copying. It's great. It's so great.
Yeah, I think we're in such a cool place, and I love that idea that people are like finding identity because they're confident in like this new, the new ethics of well, we all saw that it was his.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if I'm glad there's not 10,000 piffs out there.
Totally.
That's totally. And that would have happened a couple of years ago. Yeah. I feel like
it's a good point. If we didn't have the sort of virality, I think we probably would have seen a lot more of that. The next thing is our endless chain. So in order to keep the podcast going on for eternity, each guest recommends another guest or a few other guests that they think might be really great for this podcast. So who do you have to recommend?
Yeah, good one. Because there's so many people that would be a phenomenal discussion. I would have to point it to. I would have to say Joan Caesar. She's incredible with the things that she's accomplished, and the fact that I mean, single-handedly, she created the Canadian Association of Magicians, which was the turning point for FISM that allowed Canada to be on the same playing field as the rest of the world for the Olympics of Magic. That's a really big deal. And so in the history books, we will be looking back at Joan Caesar as being a really, really huge, valuable player in the Canadian magician scene. I
love it. And I also think great, totally nailed it in capturing one of the things I'm trying to do for this podcast, which is that history book, right? Is to put that in the history book. So that's great. I love that. The next thing is the take home point. So people have been listening to this podcast for an hour and a half at least, or however long this ends up being, and loads of info, knowledge, background, sort of a real peek into the industry and what it looks like at its best and its most challenging, and bring it all down to one thing for people to, if they think back to this episode, Ryan Joyce, what do you hope that they take away or learn from this?
Be interesting. That would be if you can learn to be interesting, you will work forever. And that's one-on-one relationships, that's on stage. You can't go wrong. You just can't go wrong being interesting.
Being interesting. It's a good goal. I was listening to this comedian and he was talking about that he decided to be an engineer. And then when he applied for jobs, they said, you have to be really good at talking to people in the jobs. And he was like, that was why I became an engineer. So I didn't have to do that. You're telling me I still have to do that? Right. But it really made me think, because there is no industry that is void of you being interesting, being a better for your job, or you being a better interacting with people better, or that's a unanimous skill. It's a
hard one, and we'll always be working on it.
Yeah, always working on it. The last thing is plugs. First, before we talk about where people can find you, you have a really big project that you've hinted at a few times that I want you to talk a little bit about coming up.
I am so excited about it because I think it's something, I don't know that our area has had this area being Ontario, Canada. So I'm working on the Ontario Week of Wonder. It's the Oh Wow Magic Festival. It takes place during the National Magic Week, the October 24th to 31st. So it's happening in my small little city. I live in a little place called Fergus, Ontario, and part of a township of Centre Wellington. And this area has gotten a lot of popularity over the years. We've been featured in blog.to, and National Geographic has even come by and took in a look. So it's a really stunning area. And go to magicfest.ca and you'll see. But the idea is it's a public festival and a magic convention at the exact same time. So we've got two groups of individuals coming and two different experiences happening at the same time. So the lay public is going to experience a whole bunch of magic around town and restaurants. When they come to eat, they'll see magicians tableside. We've got gala shows, and there'll be events happening after and in the Legion. So it'll just be a fun atmosphere for the 24th to the 31st. The first of those, the weekend dates, are going to be live shows. The rest of it will be online components, so you can experience it if you're in the area or you're not.
Amazing. So tell me about that. What does that mean? You can experience the Fergus, Ontario Magic Festival from the comfort of your own home. What does that mean?
Yeah, some of these things are, a lot of the components that we'll be doing with the festival will be filmed. That's part of this. Last year, we tried to pitch a TV show, and we're still trying to sell that. So filmmaking has always been a huge element of what I do, and so we want to involve that with the festival in a way that's never really been applied before. And so a lot of the elements that we're going to be doing is filming, and then we'll release it a little bit later for those off days. I'll have to sort of keep it a bit of a mystery for now, because we're going to actually chat about it a little in a minute here. But it's just going to be a whole different experience, and it's not a huge, massive theater, so it's going to be really fun and intimate. 250 seats. It's really remarkable. But we've got some great names already coming that are already on the list. We've got Stephen Bergazzi is coming, which is going to be incredible. Oh my goodness! And we've got Rick Merrill, who is he's so talented, so incredible. My God, he got me into sleeving like that. I love his magic, and of course Paul Romani's coming, and I cannot wait to meet him in person. I've had many conversations conversations with him. So I couldn't ask for a better, first year. And this is something we're trying to do, every year. That's the goal. So the city's behind it because, like I said, this location that I come from is a little bit of an unusual, it's a hotbed. So they have a whole month festivities of Halloween activities. It's a really arty town. You just have to go to magicfestival.ca and you'll see for yourself.
Magicfestival.ca. I love it. It makes me think of there's going to be a Canadian version of like Colon, Michigan, it's like a magic cities, cool magic conventions happening there. And like, I really look forward to it. And Paul has a book on reading the palms of cats, which I don't know if that's
Paul
helpful.
Is brilliant, so
yeah,
it does not
he's
surprise
amazing.
me. He's
So
able to divine the energy of these cats from their paws. I love that.
I am incredibly looking forward to the festival, and we're in such an exciting moment, like you said, in Magic right now, and I'm super excited to see what's to come. So with that, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. This was so much fun, and as well, big thank you to everybody at home who listened with us and learned a little bit about what it's like to be a touring magician, and learn a little bit about the real secrets.
And the next episode, I'll introduce you to my emotional baggage.
Actually, the emotional baggage you lost on a flight about 6 months ago. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next Thursday.
Well, there you go. I hope you learned something, and I hope that you liked it. I know that Ryan and I were geeking a little bit about marketing, but I think we geeked a little bit about everything in this episode. If you liked the episode, please, I know I ask this a lot, but please forward it to one person. Go tell one person about it. Pass along the episode. That's the only way that this thing grows, and I get emails every day that people are super thankful that this exists, and I want to get it to as many ears as possible. So if you liked it, spread the word. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next Thursday.